I think we can go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's the regular meeting of the CVU School Board, November 18th, 2014. Pay attention. So we'll start with adjustments to the agenda, item 2. Do we have any adjustments that anybody would like to make to our agenda? Okay, moving on to item 3, audience and communications. I think we have just one person, our own Kevin Mara, who would like to speak to us.
Thanks. Good evening, folks. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kevin Mara. I'm a member of the Williston School Board, so I promise this will be short because I have my own meeting to go attend.
And chair.
And chair, yes. Right. I just wanted to make a quick comment on the parent meeting that was held last week around standard-based grading and standard-based learning. I thought the speaker was excellent, and I applaud administration and your teachers for taking on this very difficult task. There was a vocal minority, however, that was represented there that I think, and I don't want to speak for them, so I'll speak for myself. What I heard and what I'm feeling is that there needs to be more understanding and communication with the parents in the community, especially about the changes that are happening at CVU around this subject. And in particular, what's happening in transition, what's going on now and where you're going to be getting to. Because a lot of parents who have students that are juniors and seniors this year especially are concerned about how their children are being graded and how those grades are going to be reflected on their transcripts as they go forward and try and look towards their college education. What was not clear to me from the presentation, although I saw numbers about the numbers of teachers who are adopting Common Core and standards-based learning and standards-based grading, there was a bit of a gray area around how many of those teachers are actually fully adopting it, how many are starting to adopt it, where they're at, and furthermore, are there teachers that students are taking courses from in the same areas, say science and math, where one teacher's teaching one way, another teacher's teaching in another way, and our children potentially are being graded in 2 different ways. And so these are some of the concerns that I have and that I heard from other people in the community, and I wanted you to make yourself aware of them. And although some of the people in the room kind of were complaining about the fact there was a need to change it all, I think those of us in this room are a bit past that. And my encouragement to you would be to actually accelerate what you're doing, because I think it's going to be important to push the community and the teachers and administration and everybody to get to one common grading system. So thank you for your time, and I'll let you go.
Kevin, thank you very much for speaking to us. I just want to assure you that all of the things that you raised, all of the concerns that you just listed are definitely being discussed, and in fact we will be talking about many of them today during the principal's report. So if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to follow up with you later about some of that. Great. So thank you. Okay. So then, great. Moving on to item 4, presentations. We have a presentation today, technology integration. I'll let you go ahead and set the...
So I want to thank Dan Shepherdson and Charlie McFadgen for representing us tonight with the technology integration presentation. The original plan was that the CSSU focus would be on that, and so it'd be a real natural transition into what it looks like in the high school. But that didn't happen, so we're just going to talk about some of the things that we're doing in the high school in terms of responding to the technology audit last year, and just our natural progression and how we're trying to enhance standards-based learning and using technology to help us with that. So Charlie is our technology integrationist, and Shep is the head of the technology department. I also want to thank and recognize, as we often do, our teachers who are here, Andre LaChance and Helen McAndrews.
Andre's like a regular.
Mm-hmm.
I know. It's the food. It's the food.
It's not the company?
Andre can never remember where he lives. You know? He's always,
I got it all over my source. So much for painting. Look here. Where's the clearance? It's bad.
Special amount of pressure when you're
Technology, yeah.
you really know where to hide.
But luckily Thomas is here.
It's like a curse.
Yeah.
You don't have any jokes, Charlie? You don't have
Start talking.
I'll refrain.
Projector's on mute. Please use the button 1 on
Yeah,
the
that's-
remote when you're ready to present.
So since it was cut
Molly didn't have any problem.
The ultimate irony.
Rebooting. This one doesn't have a source on it, like the ones in the other source.
It had the source, it just cut the screen in half.
The technology guy has it.
There it is. These are what I told if it was going bad in my classroom.
Misery loves company.
Thanks. Is that
Want to darken the room a little, maybe?
Yeah.
The first switch.
it is a dark slide, but they're not, but
It's coming.
Jeff, the first switch turns off the ones over.
Great, thanks. So sorry for the delay. I'm Charlie McFadden, Technology Integration Specialist. And as Jeff said, we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing this year with tech integration, also bearing in mind the points of the tech audit from last year and the CSSU tech plan. So first off, the technology committee frankly was dormant for a little while, and we have reinvigorated that committee. In fact, we've renamed it the Technology Integration Committee. That's a committee that is comprised of teachers, and we're trying to get student representation on that committee as well. We have a technology department that Shep chairs, and that meets weekly, but it's more the nuts and bolts, sort of making sure everything works. This is more about curricular integration and what are students doing. And so our charge is the implementation of the CSSU tech plan. And we actually really got this back into gear last year before the audit came back and said you really should have an active committee. So we kind of, I think, foresaw that. That's not why we did it. We did it because we needed it. And here are some things we've already done. We last year contacted all of our neighboring schools to sort of see where they are with things like one-to-one computing, learning management systems, et cetera. And we actually did 2 site visits. We went to Burlington High School and we went to Mount Mansfield. Those are both one-to-one schools. And Burlington with iPads and MMU with laptops. And we just got to sort of see how that worked and talk to teachers and administrators and students, and it was really very useful. We also talked to South Burlington and forgetting another, Essex.
We just tried to figure out from them with the one-to-one why they chose the platform they chose, pros and cons, what they were finding, what did the kids, we asked some kids what did they like or not like. We asked the faculty and staff what they liked and what they didn't like. And one thing that we figured out, that there's no perfect tool. There's some things are great for, iPads are great for recording stuff, but they're certainly not very good for keyboarding and word processing and stuff. And full-blown laptops, which Mount Mansfield is using, again, there's pros and cons. So that was a lot of it, was to try and figure out, is there one magical thing that everybody can agree on is the best solution? And as with most things in technology, there isn't. But it was certainly helpful.
It's very useful to get their wisdom. We also talk about access to technology, both in school and outside of school, in terms of hardware and Wi-Fi for students, professional development, and how to get more teachers to do technology professional development, how to make that available, communication within and to the community via technology, and more, those sorts of things. In fact, the tech committee just met earlier this afternoon. We had a really good meeting. Second thing, we're looking at our technology targets. So, you all know with standards-based learning, teachers have been articulating targets for students to be hitting in various areas. So we want to make sure that we have those for technology. Rather than having a sort of standalone piece for technology, we want to have some targets that teachers can take and incorporate in their units and say, this is a technology target I'm doing here or here. And so we're starting with a document. My colleagues and I, the tech integrators in CSSU, worked on a document that basically articulated what sorts of skills we want students to be able to do at different grade levels. I don't expect you to be able to read this, but it's, it's K2, 3, 5. No, I mean, physically read it. It goes right on up through, and I added this piece at the end, exiting 12th graders. So there's a whole list of stuff beforehand, but here are some things, we'd like students to be able to build a website, to be able to work with multimedia presentations, have some mapping skills, et cetera, do some data analysis. What the committee realized quickly, though, is that this is not very usable for teachers. So our goal is to write these as targets that a teacher could then say, oh, this is a piece that I can incorporate in the unit that I'm doing.
If I could just jump in. And the other part was, back, ESLs have been around for 15 years maybe. The expectations for student learning, not English as a second language. So the ESLs have been around for a while, and at one point in time, ESL 4 was technology, the idea that it was a standalone. And then over time, we've decided it really shouldn't be a standalone. It should be embedded across the disciplines and throughout the curriculum. So, and with our focus on SBL, we've been trying to take everything through the lens of SBL, so it doesn't feel like another thing being added on. That this is, so what Charlie's talking about is the teacher tech, or not, again, it was the teacher tech committee. Now it's just because we want students involved, it's just the tech integration committee. We want to make sure that as teachers are writing targets, for their various units, that they will now be able to go and get some technology targets and plug them in. So, okay, well, I'm doing this unit, this is a great opportunity to practice this technology skill. So that's, as I said, that they're writing targets. We're still going through the lens of all standards-based learning, so that, again, it doesn't feel like, oh, now I've got to do something with this, or I've got to do something with that. So that's kind of the mentality behind it.
The next piece has to do with the SBAC, the standard, excuse me. Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, excuse me. And last spring we had the whole faculty try taking the practice test, or no, they did take the practice test. And it was a really good experience. This word cloud here was the reaction to the English language arts side of it. What did people think about the tech skills required? And as you probably know, the entire test is done on a computer, okay? And so one of the big concerns that came out, as you can see with the reading, was how are students going to highlight these large passages of text? How are they going to annotate it? How are they going to work with this text? They're not used to reading online without the ability to do that, and then they have to answer these prompts. In fact, here's kind of what it looks like. And this is all, by the way, if you haven't had a chance, and this is all available to the public. You can see by where the scroll bar is, right, that this is just the beginning of a lengthy article from the New York Times. And students have to read the whole thing, and then you can sort of see in the background where they have to respond to some prompts. So while they're reading, how are they going to take notes? That's a big issue. Well, we turn that around into sort of a tech integration opportunity. And the very first in-service this year, we had teachers work with a tool called Digo, you may be familiar with. And it's a tool that does allow for the annotation of online text. And we've now started going into classes. I've worked now with 2 of the 4 cores on this, with students working with this tool, not just to get them ready for SBAC, although it is getting them ready for SBAC, but it's because it's a good tool. And that's the icon for it. Here's a 9th grade health class. They had to identify dimensions of wellness. Teacher wanted them to highlight different dimensions in different colors. And here's what a student does. And so you can sort of see how the tool works. You highlight things in different colors. It saves the page to your library. Next time you go back there, you can identify the things that you bookmark. So this is just good skills for students to have as we move to more and more online text.
It's kind of if you've probably heard over the years, close reading assignments. This is a digital version of close reading, because kids are going to have to be able to do that, but they're not going to have the hard copying, so they can do that. This is what SBAC's going to require, and again, it's not just to get them prepared for SBAC, as Charlie said, that we really wanted something that, this is a tool that they're going to use in college and as they move forward, so we obviously we have to give them opportunities to practice it here, and while we're preparing them for that, oh, by the way, it's also going to help them with SBAC.
We also have a small Chromebook pilot in the Holocaust and Human Behaviors class. We do have a set of Chromebooks in the students' hands. They're taking them home. They're using them in a completely one-to-one environment. And while we don't have any kind of formal analysis of ed, it seems to be going very well. We haven't had a single issue with any problems with it. The teachers and the students are reporting so far, they just really like the technology being available when they need it. It's not really. Ah, thank you, yeah. I meant to say that. I meant to bring one, and you brought one. Thank you, Helen. Good, yes.
Charlie has been nice enough to give me a Chromebook.
No.
I actually pilot one, and I love it.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean, I meant to bring one. Thank you for saving me on that. Yeah, so a Chromebook is, it's a new kind of laptop. And what's different about it is, it's, as you can see from the way Helen's lifting, it's quite light. The way it is designed for cloud-based computing. So it's designed to connect to the internet quickly. I mean, frankly, one of the, not to get it, but one of the issues with a traditional laptop here at CVU, and you've probably experienced it every time you start this computer up for a board meeting, it takes some time to connect to the network, etc. A Chromebook connects very quickly. It's for cloud-based work. It has very minimal local storage, so you don't save a lot on the computer. It's much more for cloud-based computing. And the reason it's called a Chromebook is the operating system is the Chrome browser. So it's as if you're on a regular computer, you go into Chrome, and now there are more and more and more tools. In fact, I just read yesterday there's a neat audio editing tool that just came out that are designed for Chrome. Not to go too far off topic, but for example, there's a video editor that is now being widely used. Our Media and Society class, when they edit video now, they're using a cloud-based video editor called WeVideo. They get on, and they could be on a Chromebook, they could be on any kind of device. They go home, there it is, it's the cloud, they keep working on it, they can collaborate, all these wonderful things. So that's what thank you for asking, I meant to say that. That's what a Chromebook is.
And by the way, they're like a third the cost of a laptop.
Well,
Yeah.
and there's where you
Yes.
talk about why
Yeah.
why we piloted this. We
Yeah.
checked iPads at one time. Heinsberg had tried iPads, and they found out they're just not financially sustainable. Mount Mansfield was using full-blown laptops and everything else. The beauty of a Chromebook is with this ones that we purchased, this pilot, the Holocaust and Human Behavior class, we'll get to try it for 2 different semesters because the kids they're using them this semester. They're going to turn them in January. Then we'll give them out to the second semester with a sturdy case that we got with it, $330 for the Chromebook. So from a fiscal responsibility point of view, that's great. Chrome is going to support them for 5 years, is their program. And with the vast majority of the work that's being done these days is being on the web. And it's really about connecting and research and that sort of thing. That's what we decided, when we had a long conversation about what do we need. The iPads are really cool, but they're also very expensive, and they don't do a lot of the stuff that we really do very well. So that's was a decision that's the direction we're headed. As you know, Williston's got them, Heinsberg's got them. More and more school districts around the country are moving in the direction of Chromebooks because because they can do a lot of things and because of the price.
And they're
And what
easy
is
to
the
manage.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What's the downside to them? You said earlier that there was no perfect.
Well,
They don't print well.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't print
currently
well.
printing is, which I don't
Which we're
necessarily
okay with.
consider a downside, as we're trying to
Yeah.
discourage lots
Getting
of
rid of
printing.
trees.
Yeah, that's true.
But what Chromebooks do not do is you cannot install software.
Software.
So there's certain applications you're not going to be able to run.
Right.
And so you would still need to have some labs to support some of that higher productivity, so like computer-aided design, for example.
The business lab and some of the software
yeah,
they run, or the AV when they're doing some really heavy-duty stuff.
Right.
There's not going to be a lot of apps, a lot of software on those. It's going to be mostly things to connect to the cloud.
Right. And while there are some apps that work offline for a Chromebook, it doesn't work, frankly, very well if you're not connected to the internet. So that would be another.
Helen, did you want?
Just one quick thing, they charge in like an hour, which is really great. And it really encourages, like we use them as a live program with some of our kids, and it just encourages them to save everything on Google Docs so that they have access to it. That's the cloud piece, I think, that Charlie's
And
talking
that was
about.
the other piece. Informally, myself and a few of us last year for Grad Challenge, we started looking at, of the seniors doing their presentations, how many of them were using PowerPoint versus Google presentations. and at least in the groups I had and the people I talked to, almost everybody was using Google presentations. So our clientele
It's
are
really-
used to using Google, so to be paying the site license, although Microsoft has figured it out, they're starting to give Office away for free. But you know, to load up everything with Office is really not necessary anymore. Almost everybody, or not, you know, lots of kids are using Google in
And
all
very
their apps.
importantly, the collaborative nature of it is huge, you know, with those types of
Yeah.
things.
And as he said, we rolled them out in September. We bought 50 because we needed 45, and we figured just in case, you know, at that price, it's cheaper to buy a few extras than it is to buy insurance on them for the year, so we bought a few extras to replace them if we needed. We haven't had one return. We haven't had one complaint from a kid as far as an issue with things. And they've just been, you know, so far, you know, knock on wood, it's been a great rollout so far.
We can go on about it, but I don't want to take too much of your time. Another component we're looking at is how we can really use the core. The core is such a great opportunity because, as you know, all students are nicely grouped, and it's a really great way to get at students for some of those foundational pieces that we want to make sure they have. We want to be more intentional for me to be meeting and planning with core teams this year. So actually be in on their planning meetings to help support technology integration, make suggestions where it may be appropriate. And I do go in and actually do direct instruction, you know, ideally and typically when it's needed. So for example, that health project was a really good time to introduce DIGO because they needed to be finding evidence of things. We also have the Welcome to CVU course as an online thing, and you know, part of the CSSU tech plan is you know, sort of the extended learning environment, and through our learning management system, Moodle, we created a course for students to take before they even get here, and we keep building that every year, more and more things, to sort of send that, not to send a message, but to use that well to say that here are things that you can be doing. It doesn't all have to be happening, you know, while you're sort of a captive audience in a classroom. I want to mention for the past 2 summers we've had summer courses through CSSU. I think they've been really successful. They've built a lot of energy. There were four each summer, and teachers had different choices within that. I taught one last summer called the 4 C's. This is our little Google community that we use to communicate. And the 4 C's are creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. So the modern take on the 3 R's. These are really important 21st century skills. So this course was all about how do we get students doing these things? What opportunities can we provide? We also, you may be familiar with the SAMR model. This is from Ruben Pontador. He was actually at CSSU a few years ago. I can't remember exactly. It's a really helpful model for teachers to think about how they're using technology. Is it at basically the lowest level, if you will, the substitution, where they're using technology, but it's actually not doing anything that, you know, would have been happening without the technology. Moving on up towards what are sorts of tasks students can be doing, you know, whether it's you know, talking to somebody from another state, or even a student who was homesick for a few days and was able to go to all his classes via Skype, those sorts of things. Having a larger audience to publish, those sorts of things. So we always want to think in terms of that model as well. And I hope I'm not going too long. I'm almost done.
We're out of time.
Oh, we got a time?
Right
Okay,
or not?
I'm going to really quickly wrap up. What are students actually doing? So this is funny. I just was thinking, well, in the last couple of days, what have I seen? Either me being in class or just walking by a class. What are some things kids are doing? Well, I saw a really neat thing in a geometry class where students had a pattern in front of them. They had to figure out how to recreate that using software. So they had to sort of understand what was behind the pattern so they could regenerate it. Students creating political ads. This was just yesterday with video. These are all just fun names of tools, online tools, all web-based. PictoChart, making infographics, health advocacy posters, excuse me. Compare and contrast Venn diagrams, so reasoning skills using a tool called Lucid Chart, where they have to decide what's the best way to map this out, etc. these are the kinds of things we want students doing. These are the kinds of things that technology really affords. So I'll stop there and thank you. And there are the logo. Good? Questions?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple minutes for questions, so
Okay.
definitely.
I have a question. Are you addressing safety on the internet? I know we just had a parent talk at Shelburne Community School about some of the not so positive things that are out there,
Yeah.
which are really shocking and surprising. And is that addressed with some of the students and the staff, and like what to be looking out for and what to be aware of? You know,
Yeah, that's
sometimes-
a really good question. It's something we've put into the Welcome to CVU course, although frankly, there could be more there. When I was talking about the technology committee, one of the things we were discussing is how to do a better job of giving resources to parents about internet safety. It does get addressed to some degree in the health curriculum in the 9th grade.
Certainly not I'd be lying to you if we said it was a focus. It's certainly mentioned. Hopefully they've had it, hopefully on a semi-regular basis coming up through, so by the time they get to 9th grade, they're pretty well aware of things they should and shouldn't do. They're also, some of them are tech savvy enough to get around the filters if they really want to. But the idea is that, protecting your personal privacy, pictures live forever. It's not like the old days. If I say to them, what's a Polaroid, most of them have no clue what I'm talking about, but I can give them an idea. So the idea that picture that you send off today can be around 50 years from now potentially, and even though you think you deleted it, if people want to find it, they can. So that type of stuff is just being aware that digital, and these days employers and schools are looking at social media and looking at various digital things that are out there to make decisions on employment or school acceptance and stuff like that. So, but they're kids. They're gonna make some mistakes. But we certainly talked about. But we could certainly do a better job. I think it's just a question of where and how.
And that is on the committee's agenda. Thank you for bringing that up.
An unexciting question. The apps, the creation that can happen is great, but are you teaching things that are more basic, like Excel? And I'm finding over the years I've waited for the youth to get better at it, and they're not. So the people I'm hiring that we're going to use Excel and Word and PowerPoint, the skills are lacking, to be nice about it. So, it's a little more core, it's a little more rote. But
Well, funny you should ask, because I actually just went through the course and I didn't use Excel, but we did a Google Sheets, which is, I don't know if you've used it.
that's fine.
It's very similar. And how do you write? Because I agree with you that we can't. That problem-solving side of technology is really important too. It's not just about presentation. It's not just about creativity, and we in the course we tried to do a piece where the students learn a little bit about creating formulas, generating charts, etc. But I agree with you, that is important.
And I think it's the non-politically correct answer is no. For the most part, it isn't taught throughout the school. I mean, that's one of the beauties of sometimes in the middle schools that they have kind of standalones, and so they go in and they have a class and they teach them. This back in the old days it was typewriting. Nowadays they'll teach them how to use a spreadsheet or how to use PowerPoint. They all come with pretty good knowledge on PowerPoints and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But unless they happen to get into a class where they need to figure out a spreadsheet and how to put formulas in and stuff like that, for the most part, it isn't something that's taught. And that's something we've tried to figure out is where can we embed certain things where it's logical as opposed to, because we don't have a standalone class on, technology. This skill or that skill. So that's why I say that's where those targets can come in. So whether it's a business class or a math class, they can figure out is this a good place I could use a spreadsheet, or how could I use this to generate data and that sort of thing.
And we're focusing on the math department for that.
Yeah.
The students do in science classes, they'll often use Excel or Google Sheets, whatever, to create a graph. That's about it. They don't go beyond that. So it is something we should pay attention to.
Maybe is for Shep or Jeff as much as Charlie, but part of the technology assessment was getting teachers to do this process, right? And so somewhere between professional development and holding teachers, already overly busy teachers, holding them accountable to embed technology in. And so, and maybe the third point of the stool is, you know, is how you're gonna get all these different things, that all of your goals for graduating 12th graders, how are you gonna spread those out among all the classes? It just seems like it's a kind of target-rich environment. I don't know, Jeff or Shep, if you want to talk.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it, and our initial thought is the cores who've had the most experience with creating targets and are vetting targets with one another now, starting to calibrate. That's where we would start. Now, let's see how we can embed some technology targets in the units that you've already created, and then grow it from there. But the piece that you add about, once we have a clearer understanding of where technology lives in the graduation requirements, then we can work backwards.
So do you anticipate that this will be reported then on the report card eventually, that there will be technology grade? Or?
I'm not sure about the report card, because until the state gives us a little bit of clarity about how we are supposed to demonstrate proficiency through the communication, I'm not really sure. It may live in the unit-based reports that we currently use.
An indicator,
Yeah, there you go.
transferable skill.
Yeah, Lisa?
In the upcoming years, will we see CVU students be receiving individual computers, like after the pilot program? Or is
I didn't plant her, huh? I will tell you, I would love to think so. I think, you know, I think that's kind of the trend. I think we've been slow and deliberate and thoughtful in the process. A lot of people ran right out. If you follow the papers, you follow the fiasco of Los Angeles and their how many $billion-dollar rollout of iPads. We haven't jumped on the bandwagon. I think we've made a decision, at least within the tech department and the tech integration committee, the two that have looked at it, that iPads, we've made a decision that Chromebooks is the way to go because of the tool that it provides, the opportunity it provides for students, and the cost effectiveness. If I had my way, yes, we would, in a couple years, we would be one-to-one. But again, I'm one little voice here, but that would, I think that's our vision. And you know, the state says we're supposed to be one-to-one, and the CSSU Tech Plan says we're supposed to be one-to-one. It's nothing, the CSSU Tech Plan doesn't even say should consider or may be one-to-one. It says will. And the way I'm a basketball referee, when I see will and shall, it says you must do it. It's not something you should consider. It's something you will do.
And one of the considerations is how to phase that in a fiscally responsible manner.
Right.
There's my line.
What do you think, Lisa? Do you think it would be good, or do you think it'd be a waste?
well, actually, for the Chromebooks, the problem is for people who don't have Wi-Fi at home,
Yep.
and you can't work on. Because I have friends who they have spotty Wi-Fi or something like that, and they can't always work on.
We
it.
talked about that in the technology integration meeting this afternoon, just the idea that even though we have, I'm going to say 95% of our students have internet access at home, that's still 5% that don't, and then how do we make sure that they're not left behind, that we can help accommodate them. But absolutely right. Yeah.
So I have one question that maybe you were kind of addressing, but I wasn't really clear on your answer. So there are two pieces to this. There's the kind of targets that we're working on developing so that students are graduating with certain skills. And then there's helping teachers move along that SAMR model that you mentioned. So is that something that the tech integration group is working on as well? Like working with teachers and helping them move along with that and incorporating technology in the way that they deliver curriculum?
Right, so the committee isn't actually directly doing that right now. For example, in today's meeting, we were talking about what are the opportunities that are out there. There are some conferences. There's a conference every spring in Burlington called Dynamic Landscapes. How can we get more teachers to start going to these things and to start attending workshops that are offered locally? So it is, I wouldn't say that the committee members themselves would necessarily be training, but it is, we are trying to come up with a way to make sure it is more widespread. And one thing that is effective is the work from, that teachers did 2 summers ago in that summer course, when we shared that at a faculty meeting. That has a way of really, getting interest, and I'd like to do the same thing this year. So it is a goal of ours to to have teachers take more of those opportunities. We're trying to figure out how to make that happen.
And then the other half of your question, if I heard it right, was the target piece. And that's where the teachers that are on the Tech Integration Committee are pretty invested in technology. They're ones that like it. They're the early adapters, that sort of thing. And so now the idea is to take the standards that are out there and try to make them user-friendly and break them down into targets so that they can get plugged into, like Jessica. Because the idea, if you say to teachers, especially now with all the SBL stuff and SBG information going on, oh, by the way, and you throw this at them, you could send them off over the deep end. So the idea is try to be respectful of it and just say, with the people, I say start with the people who are most comfortable right now, which is the core. Say, okay, you've got your learning targets pretty well laid out. So as you're looking at those learning targets for those various units, what piece of this technology can you slide in that so it's not going to seem like a huge add-on, and then grow it grassroots from that way up is kind of that, and using the teachers who are tech savvy or tech comfortable already to help break the targets or help write the targets basically. So.
And I should just quickly clarify the slide that I put up. Those were my ideas. They're not adopted. They're just things I have out there, but that's what the committee wants to look at and say, which of these can we turn into targets that people can do. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, so getting back to our agenda, before we move on, I was negligent in welcoming a budget buddy who is attending tonight. So this is Bonnie Christie. So, welcome. So moving on to item 5, reports to the board. We'll start with the principal's report.
Okay, thank you. If you could look specifically at the addendum, and I brought copies if somebody doesn't have the addendum. Does anybody need a copy? Yes, please. Yeah, why don't I just...
No, I got one. I was just gonna do you the duty.
Give me some exercise. That's all right. Oh, yeah, okay. And I probably should have passed this out too to everybody.
Do it again.
Okay, fine. Everybody will put their hands up for the addendum. Oh, you already have that?
Is that what that is?
This is the grading policy.
You're gonna have to make a glossary of terms.
Yeah. Is that what you held up? It's the grading policy?
Okay. So I just wanted to first mention we do have parent conferences next Monday and Tuesday while the students are off for the week. Hopefully you had a chance to look at the original principal's report. I wanted to draw your attention to the addendum based on feedback that we have been receiving for quite a while, but certainly this past week, given Mr. Wormley's visit and a number of other opportunities to provide feedback. Mr. Mara hit on several of the things that we have focused on. And the first thing I want to do is just share the fact that we want to try and ground this in data as much as we can. And right now, the only data point we've been able to look at is the comparison of grade distribution between last year, first quarter, and this year, first quarter.
This is addressing the question of you're given fewer.
This is addressing the question of has this skewed grades compared to past practices? Okay, so there's some of the data. It is very small fluctuation at this point. I won't go through much. I just wanted to point out why we did it, and we'll continue to look at that. But we'll also look at it on the individual level as well as the collective. Okay. We did work with the discrete groups. Mr. Wormley did, and he talked to full faculty about a number of practices that we've fielded questions about. The instructional coaches are creating an FAQ based on a lot of the questions that we have gathered from parents, students, and teachers. And we will be publishing that very soon. And in that FAQ will be a link, and I want to talk about this specifically. What we have decided to do was that we want to provide more clarity about what is happening in each specific classroom around grading. And so let me back up. So we have created a document, the other one that you're looking at, that describes what standards-based grading looks like in a standards-based grading classroom, and have asked teachers who have chosen to do this to look at it and recommit to this if this is what they want to do. And we will publish a list of those people in this FAQ, which will be posted on our website under the standards-based learning page. It will be up for everybody before parent-teacher conferences begin. The teachers have till Friday to put themselves on that list. If they are not using a grading policy that is this, they have been asked, and many of them already had, but had been asked to articulate exactly what that policy is for that classroom and to share that with their students in a published fashion, whether it's handed out or put on the Moodle site or both. So those are the immediate steps we are taking around providing more clarity.
Hey, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
One of the parents complained about the lack of a newsletter.
Yeah, it's been there. I checked into it. It's still there. We've had 3 newsletters.
Okay.
That's correct.
The alert now, is that going to get out to parents before
Yes.
the...
The goal is we'll have all this ready to go Friday. They're on Monday. I'll send that out probably Friday afternoon.
Okay.
Yep. With this link and this FAQ.
So Jeff, the grades that were reported in the first quarter this year, are those grades for which the habits of learning weight has been removed?
It depends
I
on
mean,
whether you're in a
because
standards-based classroom or not.
Okay.
Now, I will say
So-
that most of the people who switch to unit-based learning have minimized the impact of habits, and many of them have removed it as well.
So then
If
we
I-
might expect a depression if,
What
when
I
that
would,
happens?
what I would say is far fewer teachers used habits of learning to impact the grade this year than they did last year. By a large margin, I think.
And why is that?
Because even if you did not switch to the standards-based grading system, you did commit in a unit-based system to clearly articulating how much the habits were and to minimizing that impact. Most people went with a formula of like 70% on summatives, 20% on formatives, and 10% habits, or even less. I can't speak for every practitioner.
I have a question.
Yes.
So does that mean that habits aren't considered in your final grade?
Not in the academic grade, and it's being reported separately. But again, it's specific to which approach they're taking. Okay?
Can I ask 2
Sure.
maybe silly questions?
Sure.
Because of my time on the board, I could not answer this question of a neighbor. Why did we switch? And 2, why is there a choice to switch for teacher to
Yep.
teacher?
Well, it's a big one. And
I know, but I couldn't answer it.
should I respond, or
intelligently.
is this a discussion topic? Should I try to respond separately?
you know,
It's up to you, because we're heading down a
I'm
path
getting a
here to
lot
become a
of
discussion topic.
community. I was congratulated on taking the
Yep.
spot, and then I heard nothing.
Yep.
And now I'm getting a lot,
Yep.
so I don't know how to answer.
Okay,
can you give like just a
Sure.
a really short
Sure.
answer to, I
Elevator
think the
speech.
second question
Yeah,
will be
I-
easier to answer than the first,
Yeah,
but you and I can speak
Great.
afterwards.
yeah, I'll give you yes, that's a great idea. Susan will be the first. Remind me of the second, the
Why the
approach.
choice
Okay.
teacher to teacher?
We did a lot of research of schools who have switched and those who have switched by being mandated to switch. What we found in most of those schools was they were told, here's your new report card, here are your new standards, this is how you're going to report from now on. And instruction changed very, very little. And teachers figured out how to simply manage that system. Whereas if you went to a more organic approach and saying, here's why we believe this is better for learning, try this out, go to a training, go to a seminar, take a class, start using some of these practices incrementally, and then come on board when you feel comfortable that you can execute this in a professional manner. we just feel that that was a preferable approach, understanding that it does create some inconsistency. But I will say over and over and over again, before we did this, every single teacher had the autonomy to choose how they graded in their classroom. The inconsistency existed since the time I went to school.
Yes, that's true. Before that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Susan, you probably do it better than I could off the top of my head, but I think there's the 2-minute speech on why we're going to standards-based learning, right? I mean, it's better for kids.
The one line after, I mean, this is a road that we have been on since, this is only my 3rd year on the board.
Yeah,
And
this was far before I
they
got
were
here.
well in
Yeah.
discussion and moving along that path before I got here. So, in fact, I'm not sure how many years ago was this all kind of.
But actually, Gene, in the FAQ, there's a nice description of why. So that'll be coming. Okay?
Do we have any other?
Oh, comment, I thought that Jeff, you were really on top of things
I appreciate it. Thank you.
that day. Somewhat hostile audience on occasion, but you really seemed like you knew what was going on and where we were going and why we were going there. And I also want to thank, who was it, Monica and Emily and Stan and Catherine for showing up that evening. I know Emily had to drive back to Westford at 9 o'clock that night, only to turn around and come back in the morning, so special thanks.
I would like to second that. I mean, there have been questions and concerns and angst even before that dessert with the principal, and I just appreciate how responsive the administration and teachers have been in trying to work through those and be respectful and take input and work with it and come up with solutions. So thank you for that.
Was that a well turned out in that evening?
Yes.
Because I went to the earlier one.
Yeah.
Which was,
That was also a lot of people.
yeah.
First one.
I do have one last question, though, before we move on. The report card format. So as of now, we have, letter grades are being given out to everybody.
Yes.
And for some teachers, they're also reporting standards-based grades using the numerical 1 through 4 system.
So that, at the end of every unit, regardless of what you're doing for a grading policy, you will report how a student is doing, what their progress is, what their grade is at that point after that unit.
After the unit.
Yes. And if it's a standards-based one, then that will be based on those standard scores. All of those are combined to create a letter grade. Everybody gets exactly the same report card we've been giving since I got here.
So as of now, there is no plan to change
No,
that system?
Not yet. Not until we know from the state what are some of the accountability measures they expect to be in place. And I'm on the district team, it just began today, 3 days a month, putting an implementation plan in and learning from the state what are some of those parameters.
Great. Okay, and Lisa
I have a
has.
couple questions. So
Sure.
for the jump rope grading system, which is the 1 through 4,
Yes.
is that only for standard-based grading classes?
No, it is possible to use it for other methods, and we're working on how to exactly do that so that teachers who are doing unit-based grading can still use the same communication system and then transition them.
Because I know that I got an email for one of my classes and from jump rope. Does that also get sent to the parent, or is it just to the student?
Yes,
Yes.
the parent.
Oh, to the parent too? Okay. And then also,
got him.
so will those, like, you got a 3.8, will that be showing up on the,
Report card?
Report card as
No,
well?
it'll just be the letter grade.
okay.
Yep.
I have a question about what she had just asked. It seems like the report I got was not on a unit, but a semester.
Semester.
Or excuse me, quarter. Sorry, I'm in a.
Was it a
wrong-
report or was it the report card?
It translated into a letter grade eventually, but yeah,
You'll have to show
wasn't
me,
on a
because I can tell you the
unit.
difference between the two, but I'd have to see what you
okay.
got.
It wasn't on a unit, I could tell you that. It
Okay,
looked
well,
like
no,
it was.
we also just did quarter grades a week and a half ago.
Okay.
Or last week they came out, I believe, last week.
Okay.
It's great having parents on the board.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I know that when my daughter was a freshman, that's where most of your unit grade is happening.
That's where it began.
That's where it began.
Correct.
Okay. And Polly, you and I could talk too, because I'm going through the same thing, so. Okay. All right. Is that?
Yes. Lisa's on, right? Or do you want to? No, not yet.
Oh, it's a great.
Nope, not yet.
Not me.
We were
My
gonna
fault,
do
Lisa.
CSSU.
Jump.
Short report from CSSU. We've spent time on the special education budget because, as you all know, special ed is now at the CSSU level, so we will not be reviewing it as a CVU board. There'll be a allocation from CSSU. And actually, the only other particularly interesting thing was Elaine gave us a debrief on, Bob, I've forgotten what you and Elaine did for the last 2 days. What was it
Green
called?
Mountain Imperatives.
You want to give the short, not the list she did, but
200 of the smartest minds in the state of Vermont, most committed to the future of our children, met. I happen to be one of them, not because I'm smart, but because I'm in the field, I guess, and spent 2 days.
199, you mean? It's 199.
90, yeah, right, and me. And the need for the conference was that from some perspectives, the approach to education in Vermont is in crisis, either from an affordability standpoint, a governance standpoint, or a quality standpoint, depending on whose perspective you're having. And there's a need for everyone to get together and, to the extent they can, formulate quickly a strategy, in particular because the legislature is poised to make significant changes this year. They came close to doing that last year and hesitated at the end, but it's unlikely they'll finish the session this next year without doing something, and most of us in the field or on the perimeter want it to be something good rather than not. So there was a legislative contingent there. Elaine was there. There were board members there. There were a number of people from the Health and Human Services side, because there's also some pressure to bring more effectively together health and human services and education. And we concluded after 2 days of very good work with some degree of focus and a set of initiatives. They'll come out as a draft report in mid-December, and then a final report in January, and hopefully guide the work of the legislature. But I will tell you, it began, if you haven't seen or listened to Rebecca Holcomb's report on the status of education in the Vermont, it is an essential read. It sets the stage for, she might not use the word crisis in there, but she just takes data, current data, and gives you a compelling reason that we have some need to make some changes. And then the situational analysis that was done by the Vermont School Boards Association is also a must read. And then I would leave you poised that you're going to have to spend time as a group, as all of us are, in the January, February timeframe, trying to influence the quality of work that the legislature does.
Okay,
thank you.
great. Okay, I guess this goes back to you, Bob, first quarter financial management report.
Reports in your package. If there's any additional questions, I and your financial committee are willing to answer them. It's on the favorable side. There were no significant changes that the committee wanted made. It is a bit confusing because this isn't the year where we transfer all of special ed, but you obligated, not you, by state law we were required to move special ed professionals and have them be paid at the SU, and then move the costs back to you in some form or fashion, so you would have the special ed costs in your pool. So it got a little messy in the process. So it's a little confusing to read this first issue, because the revenues are very different and the expenses are very different, but a lot of it is just where they were recorded. So with that convoluted explanation, I'm willing to answer any questions anyone might have.
The really simple answer, and I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm going from what I can figure out here, is that we're supposed to be 154K deficit. That's what we budgeted. 154K deficit, that's the money we give back to the town. And instead we're 64 positive. So that means like 200K to the good versus our budget.
Right.
Which is great.
Good news. But it's early.
Yes, that's a forecast. That's forecast for a June 30th event next year. So we have a number of reports between now and then, before you spend it.
We'll give you a month before we spend it.
VSBA debrief, Jean?
For those of you who missed it, it was very good. Two-day event down at Lake Maury this year. Bill Daggett, who is the president of the International Center for Leadership in Education, spoke about rigor and relevance. He said excellence and equity are in conflict, and equity is very expensive. So he did a lot of talking about how every kid should get an outstanding education, but when you start talking about that, it's expensive, and that brings it into conflict. He talked a lot about emerging trends like digital literacy. He's very forward-thinking, was really a great speaker to get everybody sort of on the path of thinking big. Had an amazing statistic, which is 70% of kids graduating today cannot get into the military. They're not eligible to join the military in this country, 70% of kids. Either academically, physically, or something else. Isn't that an amazing number? That's pathetic. I mean, there is something to the fact that the military is probably not our grandfather's military. It's, you have to be tech savvy and pretty heads up so that's probably bars moved this way, but the ability to get into the military is going the other way. And if you're unemployable, you're not, if you think of the scary thought that 70% of kids are not employable, what are they going to do? What are they going to do for the rest of their lives, except end up on public assistance, and that's a really ugly rat hole. So it was sort of a good wake-up trend. And then there were breakout sessions, various breakout sessions on Thursday. On Friday, it was probably more local, I guess you'd say. We talked about Nicole Mace from the VSBA did a great job of talking about the challenges we face as a state, and had very interesting, I can't remember who was the speaker. He wasn't there, but he was the prior negotiator for the Vermont NEA. Not the one who's doing it, not our friend who did it this day.
Joe Blanchett?
Yeah.
I think so.
Joe Blanchett.
And he is, it was a video because he couldn't be there for the time. Fascinating discussion with how school boards are not, don't stand a chance against the Vermont NEA. It was a very interesting conversation. Or conversation, it was a video, but it was just funny given his background. And I mean, frankly, he was a little radical for most people in the room, but it was an interesting call. And then we had some discussions around healthcare. They had actually the South Burlington, a woman from the South Burlington School Board was on a panel talking about her experience. And then some issues around healthcare going forward for teachers. So it was there was lots of interesting stuff went on. I definitely, if you could carve out the time to do it next year, it's worth going to. They do a very good job of making sure they're not wasting your time. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Lisa.
Hi. Unfortunately, Lucy couldn't be here today, but I have a lot to talk about, so it's good. So first quarter just ended, and everybody's transitioning into second quarter. To start off sports, the fall sports season ended. The girls soccer team won state championships for the 4th year in a row. The cross-country girls got first in states, 5th at New England's, and they're headed to regionals after Thanksgiving. The cross-country boys were second at states, just a couple points behind South Burlington, which is good. And then field hockey unfortunately lost to Essex in the finals.
It was an awesome game.
Yes, it was. I was there. It was cold too. It was really cold. And then our girls volleyball team. Good team. We won. We beat Essex in the semifinals and then won against Vermont Commons in the finals, which was really exciting. We had a 2-hour-long game, which was really it was really long. And then the boys volleyball team lost to Essex in the finals, but they did a really great job. And then surprisingly, winter sports just started this week, so there were basketball tryouts and Nordic skiing started and alpine and all of that, so it's starting up again. So we talked about standards-based learning earlier right now, and Rick Wormley came to talk to student council in the morning, which was nice to be able to ask him questions and things like that. And other things that are going on in student council right now, we do a yearly Cafe for a Cause in December where we raise a lot of money to a certain organization. The cafeteria generously agrees to donate all their proceeds to a certain organization, and this year we decided on donating to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, but the local Vermont chapter. So they do a lot of education and walks and things like that in Vermont. We created a public relations group within Student Council, and we're doing a logo design competition. We want to have more students understand what Student Council does. So that's one of our plans. We do this thing called Red Hawk Radio, where we have a couple students set up shop in the cafeteria, and it's really cool. They play a lot of music, and it's kind of like a talk show, but it brings the community closer. So we'll be doing that sometime soon. And then yes, okay. And then next, Environmental Action Club. We have some exciting news. Leo in the cafeteria has generously agreed to purchase 500 sets of spoons, forks, and knives, silverwares. I know we started some silverware drives in the community, and we got a lot of silverware from that. And then Leo decided to agree to purchase silverware for the CVU cafe. So we're currently planning some informational assemblies for the student body, and we're preparing to introduce the silverware to students, which is really great news because that means we can get rid of all our plastic utensils, and which hopefully keeps students from throwing away the silverware, which is what one of the concerns was. But we're brainstorming ways to reduce that.
Big magnet.
Yeah, I think that's what they do in restaurants, but I don't know how well that'll work.
Kids will try to beat them at it.
Yeah, so we'll be monitoring. We'll have a lot of groups from CVU, so like National Honor Society, hopefully Student Council, and we can all monitor the trash, the sorting stations for about a week to make sure that students are like composting and not throwing away their silverware and things like that. There was a musical and choral conference, districts, at CVU a couple weeks ago, and there were a lot of musicians, high school musicians from a variety of schools who were here. And then the Holocaust and Human Behavior class is in Washington, D.C. for the week, and along with there is a Princeton Model Congress trip to Washington, D.C. on Thursday and Friday, and I think over the weekend as well. And last Friday, on one of our half days, there was a dodgeball tournament hosted by the Senior Class Council, and they do this annually. And 48 co-ed teams participated. Each team has 8 people, and that's a total of 384 students participating in the dodgeball tournament, not to mention the refs. And each group is required to pay $40, so the class council was able to raise close to $2,000 from this dodgeball tournament, and $500 of that went to the United Way, which is part of Greg Goldman, our class president's project, so that's really great news. And so we're all looking forward to Thanksgiving break next week. Wrap that up.
Good closer.
And
right
parent-teacher
there.
conferences.
Good closer.
Yeah.
That's great. That is so great. Thank you. Okay, then, moving on to committees. I just wanted to update you and say that the negotiations article has been sent to all local papers. You've all received a copy of it, and it will be published on December 4th. And our next article will be an update, is planned right now to be an update of the standards-based learning, standards-based grading information. But I'm wondering we might reconsider that and have an article about the athletic fields depending on the outcome of this discussion today. So that next article isn't scheduled to be published until January 20th, so we have some time for that. Is there any other? Polly, I just wanted to make sure, did you get all the background information?
I did.
For the co-curricular report?
A few days ago.
Okay. Good. So moving on to discussion matters. Our first item to discuss are the policy documents that are under review for this month, professional development and subpoenas. do we have, are there any discussion about, let's start with the first one, D2, professional development?
Lauren, it wasn't
These-
anything except the wording and the bullets didn't really line up. Didn't make sense.
It was
Right.
actually very little.
These are both pretty,
Some formatting
pretty
problems. Yeah.
straightforward, so,
Yeah, these are.
okay.
So there's a lag in the policy committee schedule during budget season, so we're actually not going to get back together and be active until January.
Until January?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be good, because this little hunk of paper that I'm going to write down all your comments, I'll never find it. I got
Okay.
it, no kidding.
And any thoughts about the subpoena, D14?
Do we get subpoena often?
Talk for-
We like, yes.
All
I don't
right
think
then.
there's a choice of what you do when you're
Part of doing business.
Okay, then moving on to 6.2, athletic fields. Topic we've all been waiting for.
Any questions? So, first of all, I apologize that you got this Sunday night? It's Monday night. It was our best intention to get it out directly after our Friday meeting, but it got out kind of late. I hope everyone got a chance to read it over. If you're looking at it. Down to recommendations of the committee is pretty much no change from last time. I just wanted to remind people who's on the committee and what the goals of the project were and what our evaluation factors were. So recommendations of the committee, I just want to remind everybody that this is just a discussion matter today, so we're not making any decisions on either one of the two. But the committee has got two recommendations. The first one is relatively easy. We're going to recommend that CVU go ahead and execute on a new drainage improvement technology on one of our fields. It's, if you remember a year ago when we were having this discussion, our options were artificial turf or a complete renovation of a field, like $350,000 each. Since then, Kurt's done a lot of work to come up with, and Jeff to work on some other options, and there's an option that's around $75,000, which is not a complete renovation, but it would be an improvement. So instead of having to strip off all the 2 feet of soil and replacing it all, you essentially are putting in pipes to drain the surface away. Like I said, it's not a complete improvement, it's better than what we have, and it also is playable pretty much right away, where the other renovation could be 2 years without a field. So after spending a lot of time on this, we are recommending that we go ahead in the spring, or the summer, I guess, to go ahead and renovate one of the fields, because under any scenario that we seriously considered, we're going to need another good field. So I don't know if there's any particular questions on that, or I can keep going and then we can come back to it if there's a question.
We want to see how that works. I mean, that was
Right.
the other part of it too.
Well, if it works very well, then over the time you can decide to fix all of our non-artificial or non-renovated
That was
fields.
one of the-
Right. But we don't want to commit to that because we don't know if it could work fabulously or could work just okay.
You say another good field.
As opposed to
What
the.
is the good field?
That's what we'll get to next. That's the next
Oh,
part.
okay.
Polly, do you have something?
No, you just answered the question. I was gonna, my question was, what if it does work? Are you gonna do the other ones, or,
Yeah, that would be a discussion for future boards.
and what if it doesn't work?
If it doesn't work, it's going to work better than what we have. The question is it worth replicating?
And is there a guarantee on the longevity of how long it
No.
will
No,
perform?
there's a lot of uncertainty around that option, which is why we're just recommending that we try it on one and see how successful it is.
The
or
other
not.
thing, because I wasn't sure which of your recommendations was going to be, whether the, artificial turf on one versus the.
That's number 2. We're going to get to that.
Okay.
This is not in place of artificial turf.
That's what you're,
Yeah.
oh, right,
Okay.
One and two.
right, I just wasn't sure.
So then to put that one aside, because we needed to kind of have that as a baseline to get to our second recommendation, the committee is would like to recommend that the board move forward with presenting an article at town meeting for a community decision on funding of a single artificial turf field. And you can see the numbers there. It's about $1.1 million. We think the bond would be a little under $1 million. And that's the discussion we really want to spend a little time on tonight. I'm going to walk through this kind of methodically because this is how the committee did it. There are dozens of possible scenarios, of different permutations and combinations and number of fields that we could do. Recognize that. We kind of started, I would say that we really focused on 4 just to simplify it. And 2 of the options we just taken off the table for different reasons. One was don't do anything except the current maintenance. We've chosen to set that one aside because it doesn't address the goals that you see on the first. We have a system that doesn't meet our goals now. Not doing anything isn't going to fix that. So we decided it is an option. However, we're not recommending that or moving forward with it. The other one is sort of the other end of the spectrum, which is 2 artificial turfs. And while we do understand the same way that the committee a year and a half ago did, that with money being no object, that is a great scenario. That would be a great option. The committee decided that really is too expensive and it wouldn't have the community support. So we took that off the table on the other side. And that left us with an artificial turf solution or a natural turf solution. The natural turf solution is really not at a point where we're comfortable making a recommendation to the board on going forward with that. So it's not really like we're saying you could bond for artificial turf or you could bond for a natural turf solution. The natural turf solution, we really don't have enough information to make that recommendation, if this is making any sense. So while you're going to see the next 2 paragraphs down below are an artificial turf and a natural turf solution and the pros and cons of each, we're not asking we're not recommending that the board go forward with a natural turf, or we decide which we want to go forward with. It's just a matter of we need to have something to compare it to.
So when you're saying that, you're not talking about the $75,000
No.
quick fix. You're talking about the $350.
A natural turf solution would look like a full renovation on one field and other upgrades on the other fields, because an artificial turf can just take so much more than even a renovated natural turf is going to take. But we don't know until we know how the $75,000 one would work, if it's a $350,000 renovation and 1 additional one or 4 additional ones, really. So we just don't have enough information.
Full field renovations.
Or more full field.
That could be another option. But our thought was that we will try this technology that seems promising and then see how it plays out. And it might take a year or 2 years in order to get enough information back on that to really know whether it's worth pursuing as a part of a natural turf solution.
Sounds very reasonable.
So just to step through, just because I know you've all read this, but the artificial turf best meets the goals of the project. You can read the board philosophy. We spent a fair amount of time on this. And Susan's a very good writer, so she wrote this up for us. And that students should have an opportunity to practice and play regular season and playoff home games at CVU on their scheduled dates of play. Beyond that, meeting the goals and the philosophy, there's a high level of confidence in the solution. So we put an artificial turf field in, it's going to work. The next one's a little bit more complicated, but it's important, which is we're going to end up with stands on a field in short order. Particularly the football games are having such a tremendous turnout that having people stand around fences is really not going to be good for very long. If you put stands on an artificial turf field, all the teams would be able to play on that stadium. If you put stands on a natural grass field, that's not going to be true. Some games are going to be played other places because one natural turf field can't handle all the gameplay. So it's just something artificial turf would give us that the natural grass wouldn't. On the other hand, it's more costly. Again, not knowing what the natural grass solution would be, it's hard to say exactly how much more costly. I think we put that at the end, didn't we, Susan?
Yep.
Just the top of the third page there, it's a range of, $300,000 to $500,000 over. What we tried to do is a 24-year life cycle, because one of the issues with artificial turf is that you have to replace the carpet. So we made a lot of assumptions. We also made the assumption that if you do a $75,000 upgrade on a natural turf, you're going to have to redo that sometime over the next 24-year life. So we made a lot of assumptions, and like I said, we don't know how many fields we're going to have to do, so I can't give you an exact answer. But somewhere along, in the range of $300,000 to $500,000 over the 24-year life cycle would be more expensive for the artificial turf. And that 13 to 20K per year is really just taking that number and dividing it by 24. So it wouldn't be quite that linear, but that's the number there. But artificial turf is more expensive. And this last one is really important, and I can't answer this for you tonight. The last sentence under the artificial turf is this issue. If we choose to go forward on our artificial turf, we'll need to develop a position on the new health risk concerns. So what I can tell you, I absolutely have no medical background. What I can tell you after 3 years of having tried to answer this question is there's no consensus on whether or not there's a health risk to artificial turf. I would say that there's no, what I'm going to tell you right now is that what I'm going to do tomorrow, because I've got it drafted, it's in my inbox, is I'm going to send everybody on the board an email with a dozen links that you really it's really important that everybody reads them and educates themselves, because this is probably the question that the community would look to us to have an answer. I can tell you what I
wouldn't even go there right now, because it actually wasn't something that we talked about as a committee.
Right.
And so we just didn't get to that point. We wanted to share where we got with this, but I think that if we go ahead and give out the links and then have that as part of the discussion for next time.
Because I did look it up, and I saved one of the links to myself because I wanted to know about that. And it was from the state of New York, and it looked like it was an unbiased opinion, and it was actually quite interesting reading it.
I think that's one of the links that Jean has and would send out to everybody.
Points of view about it right now. Yeah.
Jean, I thought we put that one to bed a while ago.
It's raised its ugly head with the NBC thing on goalies and some cancer risks. Polly actually, I mean, I can say the committee did do this, but Polly on the previous committee did do this research for us, and it's really like you can look at, you won't find a consensus. If it was a consensus, we would have it.
Jean, will you include that NBC link as well? Because I think that's been the one that's come out most recently.
Okay, so natural turf, the pros and cons, the thing on the natural turf is that while athletics are important, the cost of an artificial turf doesn't justify the derived benefits to some people. I think that's true on the committee, it's true on the board, and it's true in the community. So I think I'm just have to think of anything here I haven't really touched on. There is the issue, with the VPA increasingly requiring that semifinals for field hockey and championship games be played on artificial turf, which means that with the natural grass turf, we'd be forfeiting the opportunity to host those. And I don't know, would anybody on the committee like to add anything? I think I've touched everything that was on here, which is everything that was on our list.
I think just the, on the third page, the statement of need, which, has been a question that's been raised, and we tried to pull out the information that we had that really spoke to that. I thought it was really interesting when, who was it who talked about the number of days that fields become unplayable upon saturation, typically after 2 to 3 days of rainy weather. And then when that's followed by calm and damp weather, it's very difficult to bring the fields back online. I thought that kind of captured the problem that we have with them well.
October.
Fall, yeah.
I had a question on that, because it does say about how the practices or the games were canceled due to poor field and weather conditions. And I don't know if it meant weather conditions like thunder and lightning, and that just happens to be, put on top of that, and or they separated out the field conditions and the weather conditions, or.
That's a good question.
And I don't know
I
what-
don't have an answer to that,
Okay.
so. Was that just in one place, or?
Well, that's how it lists it for several.
2014, is that the year you're looking at?
It lists it for a few indoor practices, and then further down, unusable.
Some of this was pulled from, like newspaper articles, some of the reporting.
And the girls' basketball
So-
lacrosse. Are we allowed to
And I
ask
did get
questions now?
the information from Kevin on 2014. So if you remember, we did have exceptionally good weather up to the first week of October, but even with that, the varsity field hockey quarterfinals, we were home seed. They were moved to Middlebury because the fields weren't playable. Varsity boys soccer quarterfinals, we were home seed, were moved to South Burlington. And the girls soccer semifinal game at CVU was almost called off on the field by the official. The official's quotes were, "I have serious concerns about the condition of this field." And then on average, JVA soccer, JVA football, and field hockey moved their practices 3 times each. JVB teams were able to complete their seasons because they ended early. So if we can always count on good weather in October, you still have the issue with the postseason games. So that really came down to, and I'm happy if the committee would like to weigh in on this, is that it comes down to a question of the stronger solution versus the cost to the community in our minds. And while the committee could not come to a consensus on a recommendation on artificial turf or not artificial turf, we were able to come to a consensus that, given the state of the discussion, that we would support recommending taking it to the community to decide. Is that fair?
Especially given the fact that 2 years ago, when this was presented to the community as to artificial turf solution, that bond article was just narrowly defeated.
Well, it seems like 2 years ago. It was only
Was it last
November.
Just a year ago? Wow, yeah.
Solar freaking
Yeah, go
turf
ahead.
fields.
I know that Shelburne Community School is gonna
Did you see that
have
video?
the large
Solar freaking
bond vote for
roadways?
11.2 million. And somewhere I saw that Charlotte is working on something as well.
Building renovation.
And I don't know, like, is it every year big things like that come up, so there's no sense in waiting for a?
Not like that.
Well, that's my question. Right, and so if you think the turf is a good idea, and I know it sounds like you're not really sure of that, would it be harder to
Some of us are, Kim.
present? Well, I mean, if there were no other bonds happening, you might perhaps have a less biased, vote going on, versus if you're trying to present this at a time where both Charlotte and Shelburne Community School are like, oh my gosh, do I choose between, windows that don't have a draft and a turf at the high school? I might choose windows that don't have a draft and a real roof. And so is it possibly worth waiting, working on the natural turf, giving it a year or two for the bonds not to be around, and then seeing what happens? I don't know. Because I didn't know about how often the large bonds come up, and it sounds like.
We definitely talked about that in our committee, because there's one thing about what solution you prefer, and then there's another about what your timing is for
Exactly.
making that.
Exactly.
Bringing that forward to the community.
If you were to go with the just partial renovation of a field for 75,000, where would that money come out of? Out of the construction fund? Would it be?
Yeah, we already have.
We already have the money in hand for that, so
Yep.
it's
Yeah, we're gonna work a
feasible
little-
to do that and postpone voting on a bond for the turf, seeing that other communities have large bonds up.
It is possible to do that, yeah.
Yeah, Bob.
If I could provide some historical perspective, when you as a group were going after $20 million of bond indebtedness, Williston did pause, exactly with that thinking, that they didn't want to be playing out what they saw they needed at the same time you were thinking. On the other hand, if you're looking to avoid being out there at the same time as one of your sister schools, or your contributing schools, whatever they are, one of the local schools, it's likely Shelburne tries theirs this year, it's likely Charlotte will try theirs next year. So you might be pausing for a bit of time before someone doesn't have someone on something.
Yeah.
on
It's
the
like if you do the natural turf option, you're gonna wanna wait a couple years anyhow to see how that works, is that
I
right?
don't think so.
Yeah, I don't want to tell anybody that the $75,000 solution is going to be much better than what we have now. It's just that whether we go with an artificial turf or a complete renovation upgrade, one field is not going to be good enough. We're going to need at least two. So it's not going to solve the playoff problem. It may solve, the wetter October problem. So it's we tried really hard not to call the $75,000 thing a pilot, because it could be years before we're sure if it's going to work, and it's never going to be as good as the renovation. So it's not in place of either one of those.
So the other question I have, okay, so my kids have done like cross country and Nordic, where you don't go to a stadium. I haven't been to one of the stadium games. So when I heard that like the playoffs are at UVM, I'm like, oh, that's nice. It's a nice neutral place, lots of big stands. It's a nice place to go and have your end of your field hockey tournaments or something, but apparently that's not really what the school wants, is my impression. Is that right? And the other question I had is, when that happens, do we pay UVM?
Yes.
And how much do we pay, or Middlebury, and how much are we paying?
So the numbers, the financial numbers that you looked at took that into account.
Okay.
And I don't think going to a neutral place like UVM or Castleton, maybe one thing, girls soccer team having, as top seed, having to play their championship game at Burlington, which was second seed, is
But
different.
or that when you play, when you win, you end up earning the right then to play your game at your home field. I mean, that's the advantage
That's
that
why
you
I'm
get from
asking the
being.
question.
And I think the championship games are always played on neutral. Aren't
soccer
they?
wasn't.
Right now, they're always at Burlington High School because they have the facility.
But just because they have the facility now, so I didn't know if,
But
as
we-
the championship game, I thought at least some of them would be played in neutral facilities, but.
And I think there's a bidding process with the VPA. I'm not really familiar with how they, except I know that you have to have turf to be selected.
You have to-
So like I said, we're not making a decision today. I think the timing is a reasonable thing we should probably think about. I also think there may never be a good time. At some point you have to pull the trigger, and if it's a $950K bond over 15 years, it's maybe something we just do, but.
And this problem has been going on for years, right? A decade?
Well, we redid the fields when we redid the school, and the drainage that was installed is not anywhere near adequate for the new fields, and that's just something we've been living with for 10 years.
I've got a kid in soccer, so I know the delay or the rescheduling, but I would also imagine that gym classes aren't getting near the fields if they're muddy. So with a turf field, they could go out the next day, not during a rainstorm, but the next day they could get on the field and at least have gym class outside. And I know they're not now.
Project Adventure was looking for some space that they could use earlier in the season. If we were clearing them off for lacrosse, then the rest of the kids could get out there to use those fields earlier, so.
And I think, as we know, one of the more significant advantages is in the spring, because teams can now get outside on a turf field in advance of what they typically do.
Yeah, a lot of teams take their practices to the Shelburne Fieldhouse. So like people from Williston have to drive to 6 a.m. practices at the Shelburne Fieldhouse. And does the school pay for that as well?
Typically, we do.
The field house.
The field house.
Field house.
With a lot more kids. I know my kid is carpooling with 4 guys in the car, and not that I'm not comfortable with that. I think about it at 6 a.m.
Yep,
when
understood.
he's
It's pretty
just
common in
crawling out of
lacrosse
the-
season as
yeah.
well.
Okay, well, we are going to revisit this again, have another chance to talk about it. So Jean will get those links out to us and
Yep.
give us some
Should
good
we
reading.
invite
and-
questions between the meetings so that we can address?
Great
them?
idea.
Yeah.
If you do think of other things that you'd like to know more about, why don't you just send them to me and we can make sure we get you some answers or information before the next meeting. Okay, great. Okay, moving on to 6.3 CVU indicators. I hope all of you or most of you were there to listen to Molly today. She did a great job, great presentation, really good information. I just put this on because I thought this is really important stuff. This is like the big stuff that we do. And I wanted to give us a chance to follow up maybe with some specific questions of Jeff. We also talked at the CSSU meeting about sort of what do we do with this information. We've kind of identified our outcomes. This is our first stab at well, there was a committee that worked on the indicators, and this is our first stab at really gathering the data from the indicators. It's our first year of looking at it, our starting point for moving forward to see how our indicators are helping us understand whether or not we are meeting our outcomes, reaching our outcomes. And so things can change right now. So I guess with that said.
I had a couple things, put my other hat on, the committee hat is, I really like some of Molly's indicators, like how many kids took advanced placement classes, or, you know, rather than just all kneecap testing, you know. The thing, and this is just questions that came up when we talked about it, and Marilyn was there too, we had discussions at the committee meeting, is, so 36% of your kids are taking 4 years of foreign language. Well, world language, what, is that good? Do we have a, you know, so our outcome is we want high academic standards. And the answer is 36% of your kids are taking 4 years of world language. You know, to me, I've been struggling with how does 36% world language translate to me, and whether or not that's meeting the outcome that I have in my head. In my head, maybe 70% of our kids should be having it. And Susan said 10% may be having it. You know, it's
or why not mandate 100%? If we really want kids to do it, let's make it a graduation requirement.
Right. And then on a similar kind of.
Take that thought.
Yeah.
And extend it to this. I've done a little research into test construction. Imagine the test, and where do you draw the line so that you have to have 32% before you become proficient, and where do you draw the line that's above proficiency? I mean, it's somewhat of a crapshoot when you come down to all these numbers. In test construction, it's the same thing. Is 32% good, or mediocre, or excellent, or exceptional? You know, I think the use of it is to track it over time and to make sure that we seem to be on the right path of always getting better. But
it's interesting as a board or as a community to have a discussion about what an excellent outcome is. What is it? You know, is it? Do we have a consensus on that?
I think you could say as a system, as a school and a supervisory union, you would assume that you would always see some continual improvement. I forget what we used to always talk about continual improvement, and so if you know you can't get too much information. You won't know if it's good enough, but you will know if it's getting better or not getting better.
I thought what I heard you saying was, is that a valid indicator of successful schooling, or whatever we define it to be? So you say, okay, so a lot of kids so 36%, whatever it is, are taking world languages. How important is world languages for outcomes for students? Yeah. So it might be a good number or not a good number, depending on how it aligns with what we believe is important for CVU kids to have when they leave school.
If we have a goal that students become verbally literate in a second language,
then that would be right.
Then
we might say,
that rises
enough
to importance.
Right.
So when the indicators were developed, was there a rationale attached to each indicator as to why it was chosen to be an indicator? Molly made it really clear, for example, like the grade 2 reading proficiency. And
those are research-based.
And that was a research-based.
So the board committee worked on the outcomes, which was that one page that said academic rigor.
Okay.
And then, and believe me, that document went from 40 pages of, we want this many kids to have this many things, to a very high level set of outcomes. We want the kids to graduate from our school system to have these, and they weren't all academic if you weren't there to look at it. They were all social and transferable skills. There's a very broad, but the graduate from CVU, from our system, should have these abilities. Is what the outcome should look like, and then passed it off to administration to say, what are the indicators that you can convince me that my system is providing these outcomes? And so this was Molly's bringing those indicators back, and what our board role is now is to look at it and say, well, do the indicators answer the question? It's something as simple as, I don't know, we could, like the technology ones maybe, or just, I guess it'd be transferable skills, but there could be a very big mismatch between what the board considers what we meant when we wrote the outcomes, and what the administrative in a different room in a different time for a whole year came out and said the indicators were.
They did work with people in the district though, with teachers. They had teams of people that were doing it with them. They weren't creating them just themselves.
Oh no, I meant without the board. We
No,
weren't done.
I'm saying when they worked on the indicators, the next level.
Right.
They pulled people from the district.
Administration and the
People-
teachers.
Yeah,
yes.
worked on the indicators.
So now the question is, what did they come back with, and does that address the outcomes?
Yeah.
And so that is my question, is that our work right now, or when will it be our work to provide them with that feedback to the question that you just asked?
Yeah, that's, I
Are
think-
these indicators,
Yeah, that would be the work, and kind of as CVU, we're kind of in an interesting position because we are the end result, really, right? So it's, so in some ways, Jeff was on the committee too, so he was there. And it's,
and many
so
of the
that would be
indicators were high school level?
Not all of them.
Many of them were.
Many of them
Many of them were.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to call a second grade reading test an outcome, but
Did Molly, well, it's almost a trend indicator.
Yeah.
Did Molly, I didn't hear the beginning of Molly's presentation. Did she speak to the fact that there were so many and that they were trying to get them down to a few specific?
the indicators.
Indicators?
Did she have
Did you
stepped
speak
out
to
for a
that?
minute too?
She did not mention that.
No, because when we looked at it the last time, there had to be, let's say there were 15, and then they started collecting the data on those 15, and it was just horrendous. They couldn't possibly do it. So that's the hard part, is selecting just like the second grade one is a research-based one, and they know that that's a real indicator of kids' progress, future success in school. And there were a few others so that's it's an interesting piece, because there were so many, and now to get the 4 or 5 key pieces that you want under each goal outcome.
So we had talked a little bit about perhaps it being a retreat topic, because it's going to take some extended time to talk about it. And the other issue was trying to wrap it into the action plan. That was the whole question of even something as simple as, your math kneecap scores, and we can't get away from having, on the academic rigor, we can't get away from having some standardized test scores. How do you decide what the number is? Back to Lorna's point, right? It's like, how do you decide what that number is, and is it fair to just say, well, we want 100% of our kids to be highly proficient? That's, it's got to be something between where we are now and that number. But how does that work, and how does that? Then we got into discussions around the action plan, which is moving our kids up in that spectrum anyway. So where do those two intersect? The development of the action plan and the development of our indicators, or our outcomes, I guess. Outcomes. So it's a target-rich environment, but it's moving.
Data-driven.
Yeah.
Is there any chance, I know that I'm the Williston representative, but is there any chance to ask our customers, the parents, what they think that target should be, say on town meeting day, make them fill out a form on what they would like the school to base that measure on that they think?
We
And
do a
give 'em-
survey, and we're always looking for.
Because we do a survey,
do a
you said
survey.
town meeting, so that's why we're smiling.
So it's like what the outcomes should be, kind of. And we can't really ask them what number do you want to see on standardized tests, because that's the.
No, on a foreign language, do you want the school to force at 100%, or is there some happy medium in between?
But you
And
might
then
want
we'll
to,
measure to that.
Yeah.
might be interesting who actually comes and votes.
Well, you have to always
If you
take,
have a
the
very
survey that
skewed, you
way,
might
yeah.
have a very.
you always have to,
skewed
yeah, we
survey.
don't, the survey is kind of an indication of,
Yeah, you can't.
it's like the Doyle survey, it's not scientific, so we
And
don't use it as
I
such.
think there's a legitimate question with some of the indicators about, say you have a child who's extremely athletic, very musical, very artistic, can get through algebra 1 and 2, but really has no interest in advanced mathematics like calculus or physics, or, you know, I mean, so if you want to personalize learning, do you really say, well, we're only successful if they've taken 4 years of science? Maybe the student's not particularly.
Well, and that's probably why it shouldn't ever be 100%, but.
Right, well, you know, I mean,
Right, and
it's
as
easy to
and as
put
personalized
our-
learning plans move forward, there may be some way that we'd be able to tap into that as, you know, at what percentage of our kids meet all their goals, right? I mean, that would be fabulous, right?
Right.
And I think those transferable skills will be interesting when they work on indicators for
think
those, because a little bit of what you're talking about, success in the workplace.
Right.
How much of that are those transferable skills? So, be interesting.
All right, so is there anything that should come out of this now, or should we just kind of keep this all in the back of your head and we'll revisit this?
Speaking of
Yeah, well, I
keeping it in
think
the back of your head, because someone was saying at the retreat, we should revisit this. If that's the case, could we have like a printout of her talk? Because I have all these ideas in my head now, but I'm not gonna have them in my head.
Actually, she did tell me that she emailed it out in October, but she made some changes between then and now, so she's gonna send me a new copy of it, so I'll make sure I send it out to everybody.
Just before the retreat. Bring it to the.
Just before the
Or no,
retreat,
just,
okay.
no, I have it as a handout at the
Put it in the
retreat.
cloud.
I'll get my Google Chrome.
It's actually a really good idea, Kim, is that also, I hate it when we have like this great rich discussion and then 6 months later we
Right.
start over. So if we could maybe, we're gonna have a discussion at the board chair meeting, and if we can figure out a way to maybe revisit in February, March, April in small doses or something to keep it everybody's thought, that would be, see if we can come up with something creative on that.
And I assume they're gonna continue to work on the other ones, so it'd be nice
Right.
if we were updated
Updated
on
on
what was
the,
going
on the indicators,
between
right?
now
This is
and
only
the
one of
retreat.
3, so there's more to come. And those are gonna be really fun to figure out.
Okay, great, well, thank you. Moving on then to item 7, action matters. Could I have a motion to approve purchase services?
I make the motion.
Second?
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Jean. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 7.2, could I have a motion to approve, a motion to authorize the district to open a brokerage account at People's Securities for the purpose of accepting donations in the form of securities, and authorize Bob Mason, Mike Nadeau, and Laura Nassau to conduct transactions?
So moved.
Thanks, Jean. Second? Thank you, Kim. Don, do you want to?
The background to this is you have a scholarship given annually in the name of Donald Moore, and an alumni of your school would like to contribute stock before the close of business this year. So it's in your name on December 30th, and so we need a vehicle with which to say thank you.
What is this stuff?
He's targeted directly to help fund the Donald Moore Scholarship. Donald Moore was not an alumni. Donald Moore was a faculty member of the school years ago, and there's a number of his students who have banded together through the last 2 or 3 years to help fund a scholarship in his name.
Scholarship to where?
A scholarship awarded at graduation at CVU to wherever the lucky recipient decides to go. Am I correct?
Do we need a
It's in the
scholarship
form
money
of.
to come to CVU?
I know.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm like, wait a second.
This is money in graduating
Or is this,
students' hands.
You know, scholarships for the, exchange
Yeah.
students to come here for a
No, I'm sorry.
semester?
At CVU, you're lucky enough to have a number of these and all awarded at graduation. So
Okay.
this is one of those.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, moving on to item 8. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Marilyn. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Lorna. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and item 9, confirm next meeting dates. We've got all of our budget meetings listed here, so make sure they're on your calendar. And moving on to item 10, adjournment. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Jonathan, and he's not here. Jonathan.